Nullhocheins, der Musik- und Kulturbusiness-Podcast. Today I'm joined by Desmond Myers. Desmond is an old friend of mine and one of the most interesting and inspiring all-around artists I ever had the chance to meet. We're talking about playing live, writing music, how to have a sustainable career as an artist and what an artist actually is, and about his journey from North Carolina to Regensburg to Paris to Atlanta, Georgia. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Nullhocheins Podcast. Now, this is my first attempt at recording a talk in the English, and we're going to have to see how I fare in this. The reason for this is today's guest, who is an old beloved friend of mine and one of the most talented and hardworking people I ever met in this business, Desmond Myers. Welcome to the podcast, Desmond.
It's a privilege and an honor to be here, my dear friend Johannes.
You were born and raised in Northern Carolina?
Yeah. Yes.
You currently reside in Atlanta. After you lived in Germany and France for a few years each.
Yes.
Could you tell our European listeners a bit about the differences between making music in those three countries? And that's a big question, I know. Regensburg, of course, is no comparison to Paris because we have a population of 150K or something. And that's what I'd want to know. Yeah.
The very first time I came to Regensburg, I would have been 18. It would have been the month or two after I graduated high school. But that was only for 3 months. That was to kind of see what was going on. I was working with Nicholas Balahandrin, a producer who I had met in Charlotte, which is where I'm from in North Carolina. And it was to kind of check out, he had like a studio that he was building in the sort of like not the suburbs, but on the countryside outside of Regensburg. And sort of to check out the studio, start, kind of talking about how he would maybe make a record. I wanted to make a record of my songs. I was writing songs at that time. And then I moved back a couple of months later. I think I was 19 already when I moved back. So I had a couple of months where I still stayed at home, got everything ready to move back over. And then I know I was 19 when I officially moved, and then 23 or 24 when I moved to Paris. Mm-hmm. So, go ahead.
How was that? I mean, it's a pretty small town where we live in. It's pretty much disconnected from the world. It's a good place to live. If you've got something to do, it's a
great place to live.
It's beautiful, and it's if you know what you're doing, and if you have a family or whatever, like I'm totally happy over here.
Yeah.
But culturally, it's like, so when you moved from Regensburg to Paris, we were talking about that all the time. You were saying,
I wanted to move to Paris.
One day I'm going to go to Paris. So how was that then? After you took part in the scene here, like a lot. You played here a lot, as much as you could. You recorded with people, you wrote with people, you produced, and then you went to a city that is actually, it's so far away from what Regensburg actually is. And I haven't been to Paris, but please enlighten us.
Well, I guess like the at least just being in Regensburg, the thing was, it was a small town, but I was from a small town. I grew up in Statesville, an hour north. So I always say I'm from Charlotte, but that's like you saying you're from Munich. Literally, it's the same distance.
Okay.
So I'm actually from Statesville, which is a super, super tiny town. And, Statesville didn't have a university. Statesville has even less people than Regensburg. Statesville got like 20,000 people, or at least had at that time like 20,000 people. It was bigger than Regensburg, so it's like real American shit, like really, not like kind of sparse. And so for me, it was super comfortable because like, it was like a step up. It was like going to college. It really was like going, because Regensburg has a university town. Yeah. Everybody was my age. Everybody was trying to jam. There was a jazz school there, so you could play with people who could play, right? Yeah. And it would have been the same as if I had went to, like, to give you some comparison, if I had went to Athens, Georgia, which is like a sort of like a really cultural town, like outside of Atlanta, like a baby Atlanta sort of deal. I don't, no offense to people from Athens, Georgia, but like I think that's maybe a term of endearment. I probably stoked some fires with that one. But like, maybe even going to like Boone, North Carolina, or something like that. And that was what I was going to do if I didn't go to, like, literally the choice for me to go to Europe was like, if I hadn't had that, I would have just gone to jazz school at a town like Regensburg, but in the States. Does that make sense?
I see.
I didn't end up going to school in Regensburg, but living in another country is a school in a lot of ways. It was very, very, I'm very grateful for that time. It was really insane. It's like when I look back and have you ever read emails that you wrote when you're like 19 or 20?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Is that not the most, for me, I don't know how you feel, most painful, like the definition of cringe is when you see, this is who I was. And it's like, I don't want to get on a tangent, but I was actually listening to a podcast about the definition of cringe, and it has something to do with your ego, where it's like a displacement of how you see yourself, like you see yourself a certain way, and then suddenly you're confronted with the reality of how you actually are, and you're like, oh God, I'm insufferable, I'm terrible. And so, and it's really healthy. It's painful, but it's really healthy. And so, I think like the whole moving thing, like I wouldn't do that at 30. I don't think I would have. People say often when they're older, like I wouldn't have the balls to do that now, or I wouldn't have the guts to do that.
Yeah.
But it's also like I wouldn't have the stupidity to do that. Like you have to be a little bit stupid, also.
That ignorance is bliss.
100%.
And there is a certain freedom and naivety when you don't know what can and cannot be done yet, which is why so many artists do the greatest stuff like very early.
Yeah, 100%.
Because later on you learn everything else, what everybody else has done, where everybody else has failed and whatnot. And like I don't think you had anyone who ever did that, what you did, who told you like, dude, go to Europe. It's going to be great. And you said, thanks for that information. I'm going to do it. It was just like this idea you had this fascination with Europe that was so romantic. I loved that about you. I love you anyway, bro. I love you, man. It's so great to talk to you.
Same.
But when we were talking back then, it was interesting that you, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you tell me that you had, I don't want to get too political on here. Everything is political, and I am a very political person, but I don't want to go too deep on that. But didn't you tell me that you had a problem in school because you read Harry Potter?
Oh, I wouldn't have had a problem in school, but it was like,
it was something that you don't do. Like,
I mean, everybody kind of read Harry Potter when I was in school, but like, in family circles, like especially extended family circles, and within a certain, like in the South, especially in rural areas, you're always like several degrees away from pretty fundamentalist Christian stuff, right? Sure. Yeah. So, and that it was a controversial, like, I don't know how it was viewed in Europe, but I don't think it was controversial at all. It was quite controversial. Like, it was quite like just,
we just left it up. We loved it. We read it to our children and we were happy about it.
That's so fascinating to me because for me, I remember it was insanely popular and it was all over the news. But it's fascinating now, like with the political context that we've had, we have so much has happened since we talked. It's going to be kind of fun to, like, the words Elon Musk and Donald Trump were not things that were on our lips in 2012 and 2013.
Nope.
So like, it's fascinating looking back on that. But like, no, we had no idea what was coming. And so, but the seeds of all of that were still like, it all makes sense to me because that was still there in my childhood. Like you had the Today Show. I don't know if you know what the Today Show is. You guys have like a similar thing. It takes place in New York City, and my mom would watch it every morning. And so you have these coastal elites, as certain people would say nowadays, talking to the populace who, they're talking about how great Harry Potter is, and they're interviewing the cast. They're talking about the movie, that they're promoting the movie, And meanwhile, in the backdrop, the stuff that I'm hearing from, not necessarily my church, because I went to a pretty cool church, but like other people, like it's controversial. It's not like it's kind of taboo. It was kind of a taboo because it was talking about witches. It was talking about stuff they didn't like, and anything that's popular that's not Jesus, anything that there's this whole. So yeah, it was definitely like, it was definitely a thing.
So you came to Europe, which is by comparison a pretty damn secular place.
Yeah, sure.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God. I see what I did there. So, but you sort of came to the mid-sized, small-sized version of Europe, which is pretty much Europe. We are in Germany. We sit slap bang in the middle of it. France is just as Europe, I guess, as Germany is. But you went to Paris, which is something completely different.
Paris is the world. I mean, Paris is like any major city, like London, like LA, like New York. It's just especially Paris is like, I don't know. It just has the cosmopolitan nature that for me was a first. And I use the word cosmopolitan, with no meaning attached to it. That was just like there's literally like just everyone from everywhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like you're going to find a community of people from anywhere. And so that's what I love about it. I mean, that's probably the coolest part of Paris, probably the best part of any city. That's the best part of LA. It's the best part of Atlanta. Like, to be honest, that's where the good stuff is.
But you went there as the person I'm talking to right now, but also as a musician with a dream in your backpack. So how was that? Like, that must have been amazing and intimidating.
I think for me, I thought that Europe was exotic. I thought that going to, and I think I kept running into people, particularly in Germany, who would say like, I kind of feel like people would look at me like, what are you talking about? Because I would be like, it was hard for them to understand why anyone would come from the States to Regensburg. They were just like, it was just like, it was almost annoying. It was like every single person I met, they were like, no, you have to explain to me why you're doing this. Why are you here? And I was just like, can we just get over it? Like, I felt like I had this really rehearsed like story where I was like, well, I met this producer and I really wanted to live in Europe and I really wanted to speak another language. And it was just like, Jesus, can we get over the fact that I'm here? It felt like reintroducing that. You couldn't just introduce yourself. Hey, my name is Desmond. It was like, here's all this stuff, And I didn't realize that essentially the United States is a European colony. And I think that I thought that this is so exotic, and it is exotic. It's medieval. Regensburg in particular. It was beautiful. It was, a foreign language, which I, had the privilege to learn and stuff. And, but I was really naive. I hadn't traveled. Like we went to Canada. We went to Niagara Falls when I was like 15 with my mom. And that was the only time. You don't need a passport to go to Canada when you're American. You just need your ID. And so I didn't even have a passport. So I'd never been anywhere where people spoke a different language. I had friends in high school who were from South America, and I think that was a big impetus to leave, because meeting my friends from South America in high school, it was particularly some friends from Argentina and some other friends from Italy, who had like a little Italian bistro in my hometown. Meeting those people, I was like, wow, this is really interesting. Like I don't know. It was like someone had kind of kept the rest of the world like hidden from me. Like, I'm sure there's some kids who grow up I think about that a lot. Like there's kids who grow up in New York and LA and they go to Europe every summer vacation and they're like, yeah, what's the big deal? It's Paris. Like, it's just another place. For me, you have to understand, like, this is maybe embarrassing to admit, but it's just the reality. I wasn't thinking about those places until I was like 14 or 15 or like pretty like old. Like I wasn't thinking about other places so much. I was thinking about the UK, but yeah. So sheltered in a way.
I want to get back to my question because we haven't gotten there yet. Like, what was it for you? No, it's totally okay. It's totally okay. All of this is so interesting. But for you as a musician, because this is a musician's podcast, and it's basically, I'm talking about the lives of musicians, but less the biography, but more of the setups that they have.
Oh,
and
okay.
we're gonna no structures.
Okay.
Experiences. What it is that you do singing, songwriting, producing, blah, all of those things. And you have done all of that in Regensburg, and you took that to Paris. And I just want to know, as a friend also, who like, I was standing there waving and you were going, how the music scene in Paris hit you, how that was for you.
So the Paris music scene hit me fast and heavy. And I'm so lucky. I'm so grateful for that. In the same way that I'm grateful that I went to Regensburg, because I'm grateful that it did not take a lot of time to randomly bump into not like insanely influential people, but people who had something going on. Like literally, one of the third or fourth people I ever met was a guy I eventually ended up touring in his band. Then it's to date the biggest tour I've ever done. And there was all like, France is so, I think like a lot of people know this about France, that France is I apologize. France is an industry that supports the arts kind of unlike any other. And that's 100% true. I mean, it doesn't really, in my experience, it doesn't get more supportive than France, or particularly the Paris music scene. And so there was like, I immediately got into like some ateliers where there were songwriters where we could meet, share ideas, get coaching, all that kind of stuff. There's all kinds of stuff that the state is sponsoring, but not just that people do. There's like a very collaborative nature. And it felt like everybody had, like in Regensburg, everybody could play guitar, or they could sing, or they had a band.
But
in Paris, it was weird. Everybody had a project, and they started using this word project. It's fascinating because I still use that word, and I'm not sure if that's my French vocabulary still like kind of lingering from living in the States. But that's really different than even in the US and in Regensburg, the way people did it. Everybody had a stage aesthetic in Paris. Everybody had a story, especially visually. Everybody had a visual aesthetic that they were trying to tell, and a plan and a goal of action, what they wanted to do. So that was very interesting.
I wanted to finish your sentence when you just said, in Regensburg, there were people who could play their instruments. But if you needed a but for that sentence, it would be, but there are very few people with a vision, like with an actual vision of themselves as an artist. I'm not trying to bash Regensburg here. It's just that anywhere, when you're in Paris, when you're in Berlin or in London or something, that's different. But in a small town like this, it can be enough if you can play your guitar and you can feel like a musician who's really got it going on, because you have your gigs and there's nobody else. The ceiling is like down here, but in Paris, it's all the way up. So you always had a vision too. You were looking around, you were trying yourself out, you were moving, you were experiencing a lot of stuff, but that must have been great for you then to run into that.
Oh yeah, it was some of the best years of my life. I mean, before kids, like there's a whole other level of beautiful that comes with all that era. We'll get into that probably later, but like being around that music, being around so many artists who just kind of, had a seriousness to them, a real like seriousness, and all also, there's culture has a big part of it. So like one thing I learned in Regensburg was to, like in the States, we're known for being really nice and really kind of even in a fake way. That's kind of like the impression that some people get, But, it doesn't matter. Like people are going to say, man, you sounded great, man. God, you're so good. And I grew up hearing that like all the time. It's like, whoa, you're fantastic, dude. That was awesome. And I remember being in Regensburg for the first time. It was the first time people would say stuff like, hey, man, you're not very tight on that take. That take is like actually really not tight at all. And it was like, oh, I loved it. Like I loved that. I was like, yes, this is so fucking helpful. Like, thank you.
Yes.
And the French are possibly even worse. Mm-hmm. There is very like, of course,
in the honesty, you mean?
Oh my, the frankness. It's from those people. You know what I mean? Like
good word.
Frankness. Yeah. Like it's almost like I've heard some things that I may, this may be like, I don't fully understand the French education system like 100%, but I think that they grow up with I think the French education system traditionally is quite brutal. Like they sort of learn where they are in the class, if that makes sense. Like they're like, and maybe Germany has this too, like first in the class, and there's a ranking, which is insane for an American. Americans, that's not how it works at all. And French people kind of have this awareness about them where they're like, yeah, I'm like maybe middle of the road, or I'm here, I'm there. One thing also I realized is that people specialized in Paris. So like there were guys who were like, I'm a guitar player. That's all I do. I'm a guitar player. And God damn it, I am a cool looking guitar player. I have a cool guitar. I have cool pedals. I have good sounds, and I am a guitar player. And in the States, when you say I'm just a guitar player, you're trying to be a Nashville cat. You're trying to play better than everybody. You're trying to play faster. Your gear may suck. You may look horrible on stage, but you can play. It's this very like, it's this very almost like, just like, what do you got on your instrument kind of thing in the States. And in France, it was like, oh, I may not be the best player, but I've got my thing. I am
interesting.
You know what I mean? Like I played in a band with a guy. His name was Louis. Shout out. Well, there's two Louis guitar players that I played with, but so I played with this guy named Louis, and he in the band Her, and Louis Crispers. He has a Dutch last name, and he played 70s Italian guitars or 60s and 70s Italian guitars that had all of these like circuits, you know, like Jazz Master style circuits, super like sparkle finish, yellow pick guards. I mean, like red pickup covers, just like Ren and Stimpy aesthetic. If that makes sense. Like it's like he had the most crazy, like just wild thing. And he would wear shirts that he'd rolled up. He had a mustache.
Of course, he had a mustache. Yeah.
Of course he had a mustache, right? And he played guitar. I don't know how to explain it, but the way he played, he wasn't the craziest soloist. He actually hated it. He would make fun of me for playing blues solos all the time. He'd make fun of me. He's like, so cliche. And in a French nice way. He wasn't being mean. And he just had this thing, and damn it, he was better than me at his thing. He was just good. And I think in the US, we try to do this thing where it's like, there is a benchmark for a good guitar player. Can you shred? Can you play jazz? Can you play country? You try to almost be a generalist. And in France, it's like, nah, if you want a rock player, I am your guy. I look cool. I sound good. I do all these things. So yeah, or I'm a producer or whatever. So that was, France is so, I just feel like people had this awareness and this focus that was fascinating to me, this confidence. I think a lot of people talk about the French sound of je ne sais quoi, like kind of thing. So that was so mysterious and really, really cool.
But now that you moved to Atlanta, which is what size is that? How many people live there?
It's growing every day. It's kind of insane. It's like gonna be the next like LA, but it's it's hard to say. I think Greater Atlanta is like maybe, I don't want to say it wrong, I think 5 to 6 million.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's huge.
Okay. I had no
idea. The city
of
Atlanta is only like, I think like 500,000 is the city of Atlanta, but like, you know, it's like Paris is also like, I think only like a couple of million in the city, and it's like 12 million in the Greater Paris. So
question.
Yeah.
Could it be that this that's actually one of the parts that's most interesting to me. If you compare Paris to Regensburg, of course they have a different attitude and a different aptitude of everything and vision in Paris, because it's Paris. So, but wouldn't the same that you said about those people in Paris be true about like the upper echelons of American musicians, like that they have a vision, that they have an attitude, that they know exactly what they can do and what they cannot do, as compared to like people living in a small town who are like the best musician of that small town, but they are generalists because, well, of course you record yourself and of course you also play bass and blah, 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 all of that. Isn't that like just the size of the city and the level that you play at that makes that difference?
That's a really good question. I think like when you compare, so like I've been going to Nashville and LA a little bit this year.
Okay.
I'm not like fully ingrained in either of those scenes, but I'm kind of getting started. I'm making my next record in Nashville. Ooh. And I still think like, yes, I think there's a point where like Like LA has things that Paris will just never have, and LA has an upper echelon that doesn't really compare. But the same can be said for Paris. Paris has a thing. Like Paris is one of my favorite cities. It really does just have a thing that is hard. And I think one thing that I really respect about French music culture is, and there's a lot of this, you know, and I think your point is totally valid. There is like a thing of like, it's just a big city at a certain point. Yes, Berlin is cool. Yes, London is cool. Yes, New York is cool. Yes, LA is cool. They're just cool by nature of all the cool people filtering in and making it cool. Sure. Paris has a thing though, where like one thing I really learned to love in Paris was like records, like just listening to music. Like people know so much music and they have a real appreciation for, it was almost like everybody was like, could have been an equally good DJ, you know, because they just knew really good stuff to listen to. And it was like, it just opens your brain to so much good music. And that helps you appreciate music, not from a technical, like a generalist technical perspective. That helps you appreciate it from an aesthetic perspective as well. And I think that they're masters of that, I think.
Yeah. Talking about aesthetics and style. I saw this summer that you got yourself a stylist.
Yeah, I do.
Which is so fitting, not because you need one. You're probably one of those people, and of all of those that I know, who needs a stylist the least. Because, dude, you got style, and that was always important to you, and that was something where I think that you just said it. There was something that you appreciated also about the Paris musicians' culture, that they valued that.
Yeah.
So is that something that you took from Paris?
Well, it was something that it's very nice of you to say that I don't need one, but I definitely do. I appreciate style. I'm passionate about it. I think it comes from just loving 70s and 60s rock. Like all those British guys, you know, London is arguably just as much a fashion capital as Paris. And all of those guys, George Harrison, bless you, George Harrison, Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, like Bowie, all those guys were going down to wherever, Mick Jagger, they were getting their look right. And it's part of it's a part of our job. It's part of the way it is, of the way you look on stage. And it's also a part of the artistry, I think. I think it's like what you want to say. And I think for me, I try to, I don't know. I don't want to intellectualize it too much, but I've always kind of cared, like you said. I've always kind of cared. And I look back at I didn't always have it together. I was still figuring it out, and I was working with different budgets and stuff. And
but it's okay,
I wish someone would have told me,
young.
hey, don't go to H&M. Just go to thrifting. It's called thrifting. I wish someone would have just said thrift when I was like 19. It's cheaper and it looks better. Like it's okay, you know. I think it's important. I think subconsciously that's why I have like images of Paul McCartney like sitting in Abbey Road with like a. Did you see Get Back?
No, not yet.
Peter Jackson.
It's a shame. Not yet.
You love it. It's truly sent me down so many rabbit holes because I love that band so much.
Yeah. Same.
Okay, cool. I don't know how much we talked about them, but they're my absolute favorite. And
I think that's cool. They are like up here. That's about as much as you can do. It's them.
And they had so many, and they were together for such a short amount of time, and they had so many different looks. There's so many different looks.
Yeah. And they were together for like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. They recorded all their albums at that time. They finished when they were about as young as you are right now. That is so sick. Like,
no, they were younger than me, dude. They were way younger. Paul wasn't even 20. Paul was 26 when they were making Let It Be.
No shit.
Dude. Yep.
Boah. Fucking
19. It was 1969. He's born in, I think he's born in 44.
Consider it. Okay.
26. It's insane. It makes no sense.
Yep. But they had a vision.
Yeah.
They had a vision as well. And that extends far beyond like, how does this chord work on the guitar? It's much more than that. And in order to make that vision work, you need people. not only in the audience, but there are structures out there that could help you along your way to, well, getting your music out there. And you and I both had our experiences with people trying to help us or trying to sort of rob us. Like, it's a spectrum of sharks and a spectrum of good people too, who really are just there to help you because they love the music so much. That's why I wanted to ask you, how is your setup right now? Are you doing it all solo? Do you have a manager? Do you have a publisher?
So it's a very current thing that I'm actually independent.
So you were not until recently.
Yeah, not until recently. I'm recently divorced as well. But it's I actually there's a silver lining. It's a pretty fresh wound, but I think I can. I think I have some philosophical stuff about it, but I can explain. I'm independent right now, but I'm not alone. It's actually not true. I'm not alone. I have a distributor. I have a European booking agent, and I am doing. I guess I'll just kind of lay my cards on the table. I'm doing something that I have never done before, and that a couple of artists are trying. I am actually talking to private investors to fund my next record.
Whoa!
Yeah,
next level.
and I actually have a lot to say about what you just said. Do you mind if I kind of go on a little rant for a second?
Please, rant away.
I'm getting the sense that like we're supposed to kind of talk about making music work.
Yes.
And I think that for me, my philosophy on that is, and I'm super curious to know about how you do it, because my philosophy is like every musician wants to make it. And I think there's a word missing from that. I apologize. There's a word missing from that sentence, and it's making it work. And I think that we're not in an era where there's a clear breaking point anymore. Maybe there is, but whatever. I think for the vast majority of artists, you have to find a way to make it work. And in France, we were to put all my cards on the table. We were actually planning on moving back to Paris with the fam. And because I signed to a French label in 2020 after I'd already lived in Atlanta.
Okay.
And it's just a little French label that the drummer of the band Her that I used to be in, he started. We had a great run. We put out my record Shadow Dancer. We played some really cool shows in France, thanks to my booking agent Stephanie from Sanguine. And it was sort of like, well, everything's kind of like all my stats, like all my Spotify, France is my number one country. Like that's where my most listeners are and everything. And so it was kind of like, well, I'm living in Atlanta, but I was in France 4 times a year minimum. So from 2019 to 2022 until recently, last time I was there was in June. I was in France a lot. And I was, obviously we loved Paris. We loved the time that we had there. So we were planning on moving my family back with, because it was just hard, being away so much. And my label and I decided to part ways for this next album. And it kind of came from a decision to say, that was going to be really complicated to move back to Paris. We weren't going to be young and single anymore. We were going to have kids. This is really personal. Sorry. I hope this is kind of helping answer your question, but it was,
it does.
It was like, Atlanta, we can maybe talk about Atlanta a little bit, but I was like, I think I'm going to stay here and I'm going to do my record. I've made, a lot of music in Europe, and I've relatively made very little music in the States. I think that I don't feel like I was so focused. Like it feels like I got to Atlanta and then immediately just started going back to France. It feels like The Godfather Part 3. It was like they pulled me back in. It was like I just kept going back to Paris so much, and I felt like I never really gave Atlanta a fair shake. And Atlanta's amazing, and Nashville's awesome, and like there's the States are great. And I think I had a hard time seeing that I wanted to live in Europe. Like when you knew me, I wanted to be the European guy. I wanted to live in Europe so bad. Yes. And I think now I'm reaching an age where I'm like, you can. This is not a one-way street. Like you can, you know what I'm saying? So I am talking to. I played a show in Nashville last year, and I met an old friend who's been a supporter since my days back in Charlotte. Mm-hmm. And I hope I can say this, but he reached out to me and said, "Hey, if you ever need an investor, he's done pretty well for himself. Hit me up." And when he said it, I was like, "Oh, I will never do this. This is absolutely not. This will never happen. Thank you, but never." And, sorry, the thing is, a label is just an investment deal with fixed equity. That's all it is.
And it's a pretty crappy deal at that.
It depends on the deal, but I mean,
usually it is.
And this is why I said I'm going to kind of go on a tangent. So I've been learning. I'm please shut me up if I'm talking too much. But I've learned about some different ways to split equity. I'm lucky to have some family member who work in Silicon Valley, not in Silicon Valley, but like California kind of tech area. Mm-hmm. And they've talked to me about. I would encourage everybody listening, if you're thinking about how to I would really encourage everyone to check out Slicing Pie by Mike Moyer. It's a book. The problem with every situation you talked about getting screwed over from people, having bad deals. This kept happening to me, and it would really, really get me down because I was like, "Am I a bad person? Am I a terrible person? Am I hard to work with? What's wrong with me? Why is this happening?" Mm-hmm. And when you read Slicing Pie, and you get it, you start learning about investment in different industries. You learn that this is normal because it's so hard to divide equity in something where you're putting time, money, ideas, research into it. And I won't get into explaining what Slicing Pie is, but just briefly, it's a model for tracking how much an individual has actually put into a project. Mm-hmm. It allows equity stakes for your time. So how much time you've actually put into something, and that splits the equity. And a label doesn't do that. With a label, you're essentially taking out a loan to go do your job. It's like taking out a loan to go to not earn a salary. It's like taking out being indebted to the company you work for.
Yes.
To go out and be on the road and not make money. It's really like that. And so there has to be a new way, and this is the way that I'm trying. Sorry.
Could you in a sentence or two just explain the concept of equity for the European listeners, because that's not a term that is too common over here.
Yeah, so equity, I'm sorry, this is very unartistic of you. It's a very financial term.
We're talking about the music business, and that's part of it.
It's a business term. Sure, absolutely.
Yes.
I appreciate that you I like to surround myself with people who treat. I think that I like to surround myself with people who treat this like the steadfast business that it is. It doesn't.
Yes.
If anyone is worried about that affecting the music you make, you only need to listen to the music that I think you and I make. Like, we try to we're sitting here trying to make it work, but we're not thinking about.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
No one's compromising anything just because we think about the
compromise.
business side of it. The one doesn't hurt the other.
Absolutely. Way. So I equity is just the stake that you have in a product. So if you typically with a label, they own the master of your record. Yeah, you get your publishing, but the master is really where it's at. The master is the product. The Taylor Swift case is a really great example because have you followed the Taylor Swift, what she's been doing?
She's been re-recording all her older albums just to get, the rights for the songs back.
Right, basically. Right. And I think that's such a good demonstration of the difference between master and royalties. And and labels will typically take 100% of your master, which doesn't leave you, I'm sorry, but unless you're getting #1 radio spins, you ain't living off of that, those royalties. That's their streaming money that they're getting. And I'm not pro streaming or whatever, but I'm definitely not anti streaming. It's a way to make money, and it's a way to make it work. It's the new radio. So that's what equity is. It's your stake, whether it's 10%, whether it's 50%, whether it's 100%.
Yeah.
How much you own of that.
Yeah. I'm totally with you when it comes to taking the business side of this seriously as an artist. And that is really what, that is actually, until you understand that as an artist, if you want to or not, you are a business.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand it as that, then you will be screwed over. That's just what it is. And as soon as you start thinking...
Couldn't agree more with you.
So I'm totally with you on that.
Speaking from experience.
Oh, yes. It's just a very recent experience that I'm not going to name names, but
so sorry.
Shame. But so you say you got like a private investor that might finance the production, the promotion, all of that.
So I've been learning about how to do these to create a budget, which is something that we never did back in the day. We would just be like, how much does it cost to record? How much does it cost to mix? How much does it cost to print the CD? Okay, well, that's how much it's going to cost. Like we didn't think about distribution. We didn't think about all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so what I've come up with is different budgets with different projection models for each budget. I'm asking for a specific amount. Mm-hmm. There's models where I am saying I'll invest in the production. I'll pay for the recording, and and you pay for the promotion. There's 100%. I know how much money I have saved, which is not enough. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I would need investors, right? And then there's a model. It just goes up. It's like, and I don't mind sharing numbers. I can only afford to put about $10,000, $12,000 into my music. And that's really, rubbing pennies together. I think a lot of artists, that's maybe even a lot for artists. I don't know that. I think a lot of people can relate. Numbers, it gets complicated, but I think if we're treating this like a business, we have to talk about it. And then the budgets range up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, because if you're asking people for money, they want to see that. They want to see how close am I going to get to maximizing that amount of money. And you have to learn how to talk to those people and how to show that your money can make that. And the crazy thing that your music can make that. And the crazy thing is when you start doing all that math, you're like, wow, actually there's a way that I could get really to a very specific spot that I want to be. And that takes time to understand where you want to be. Yes. My biggest frustration is like, I feel like people have this like really narrow view of what it means to make it as a musician, where they're like, you're famous. Yeah. And it's like this, it's like, what does that even mean? Everybody's famous. Everybody has Instagram. You're famous now. Everyone's fame has been democratized. So that doesn't mean anything anymore. It's, there's so many ways. And I find YouTubers incredibly inspiring in this way. They're so good at creating community. And I think that's what I'm trying to focus on is just like, okay, who likes what I do? You like it? Let me focus on you and treat you like I hate to use the word customer, but like treat you like a supporter. A supporter is maybe the right way. And if you're not feeding it, and I've been a bad example of this recently because I've been going through some business woes. So I've been a little bit off. But I think nurturing that community and growing that community for the people who support you is vital to making this thing work.
Das war Nullhocheins, der Musik- und Kulturbusiness-Podcast. Bevor jetzt jemand googeln muss, Equity ist Eigenkapital und da gibt es sowohl finanzielles als auch menschliches Kapital als Künstler. But that is a longer story which will be continued in part 2 of our conversation. Stay tuned and may we all have a magnificent 2023.